If you've been watching this channel, you'll know that I love rigging up cameras, and the same can be said about this. This is a Sony A7C. It is my favorite camera for YouTube right now, and there's a few reasons why. So when choosing a camera for YouTube, you really don't need to build anything quite to this scale. I know this is very much overkill for YouTube. The reason I built it up like this is because I have the parts to do so. If you're just getting started, you're buying your first camera, I wouldn't necessarily advise doing this just for YouTube, but I love doing this, so we're going to talk about it anyway. So first off, let's talk about this rig. I'm not going to spend a huge amount of time breaking down every single part because this is largely the same as my Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera rig. It's got the same bones to it, essentially. So first off the bat, a couple of things you're going to notice. I've got a top handle and a side handle. These are primarily just sort of, I have a better grip of the camera whenever I'm trying to use it handheld. The top handle here is the Nitsy Stinger Handle V2. Really cool little handle, definitely encourage you to check that one out. This is my favorite side handle, the wooden, it's like a walnut style handle by Tilta. I think it's a really beautiful handle, and it fits in here really nicely. If I turn it to the side, you'll notice that the actual profile of the handle is very close to the camera. A lot of other handles that you might see out there stick out really far, and I just kind of like to keep my camera rig quite compact. I know you might find this funny to consider this compact, but compared to a lot of other cameras that I've used, this is pretty compact. Now on the front here I have a teleprompter. Now I do not actually use this teleprompter to read words. I actually have a monitor here, which the camera feed goes straight to the monitor, which is reflected in the teleprompter and back at me in the image, so you can kind of see there's a bit of a reflection there. This allows me to just keep my framing correct. It allows me to make sure that as I'm filming, I know that I'm always in the right spot in the framing. Also, it means I'm not tempted to sort of look over to the side of the camera while I'm talking and stare at the screen. This is something I learned from Caleb Pike over at DSLR Video Shooter. If you haven't heard of him, first of all, I have no idea how you haven't heard of him, but definitely go check out his channel. He has a whole video about using a teleprompter as your monitor for making sure that your framing is correct when you're a solo shooter. It's incredibly handy. The entire rig is powered from a V-mount battery on the back. I'm using one of the KMTV batteries here. Nice small profile, really doesn't take up a whole lot of space, and that is plugged into this. It's one of the Nitsy battery plates. This is the version 2 of the Nitsy power plate. It has a USB-C port, which I use to power the camera. It's got a DC port, which I use to power the monitor, and then 2 D-tap ports. I'm not currently using those, but if I had any other accessories that I wanted to power, I'd be able to power them from those, and it's incredibly handy to have everything running off of one battery. Now when I take the walnut handle off the side, you'll notice that I have quite a lot of cables tucked in pretty tightly in behind here. It's a really tight fit to get all of these cables in here, but this has worked really well for me. For audio, I'm using a Rode Wireless Go 2, just mounted to the top of the cage, connected to a Rode VideoMic NTG, which is right here. Now to power the camera, I'm using a really small right angle USB-C to right angle USB-C tucked in behind here. If I get the screen out of the way here, you'll be able to see this short little cable. That just powers the camera, and it works really great. I don't have to take the battery out of the camera, so it'll run even if this battery dies. The monitor will die, but the camera itself will keep running, which is incredibly handy, and it lasts a really long time, and it tucks in really nicely. There's not a whole lot of cable management to do. The only other port that I use here is the HDMI port. Again, I'm using a right angle cable. It keeps it a lot more low profile, which allows me to get the handle on there, and that just runs straight into the monitor itself. And that's kind of all the cable management from the camera. So you got your auxiliary cord, your power cord, or the USB-C, and the HDMI cord. The only other cable in this camera is on this side. The monitor that I'm using, the Portkeys monitor, is using a DC to sort of LEMO or 5-pin cable. I'm not quite sure what it's called. And that just goes straight again into the battery plate right here. So that sort of tucked in underneath, running to here. Hey, I don't normally do this, but I just wanted to say, if you're enjoying this content, hit the like button, maybe drop a comment down below if you have any thoughts, or even subscribe as we continue to build this channel. I'm so grateful to everybody who's subscribed. We've just hit 1,000 subscribers, which is crazy, and I just want to say thank you. And yeah, sorry for interrupting. Let's get back to the video. Now, one thing you might notice about this main rig is that I have a little NATO monitor mount here that is currently not being used. The reason I have this is because sometimes I might not want to have the teleprompter on the front. Sometimes I'll use this just as a cinema camera style when I take to a shoot. I don't want to have to build it into another entire rig. So if I don't want the teleprompter and I want to be able to just use this handheld, what I do is just unplug the monitor, take that out. Got a little NATO rail on the bottom there, and that slides straight onto the monitor mount. I remove the teleprompter altogether and throw a matte box on the front plug everything back in, and now I have a really nice handheld rig that I use for regular shooting, regular filming. And that's actually my favorite thing about this rig design. It's incredibly modular. So if I'm wanting to have it in the studio and use the teleprompter, just slap that on the front, stick the monitor down on the teleprompter. If I want to use it in a vlogging style, or if I want to use it handheld to maybe take photos, or just to sort of narrow it down, maybe I'm traveling and I don't want to have the huge rig on here, all I have to do is remove the handles. I unplug all of the cables from the side of the camera. I'll remove the matte box as well because I don't tend to use that when I'm just using the camera. Then there's a little tiny screw right here that I loosen. The whole camera slides right out. I got my little handheld rig. All because I have this little Arca Swiss plate on the bottom of the cage that I can use to have it mounted to the rig or just to slide right off, which is incredibly handy. And then you just end up with a camera. I can use this for taking photos, or I could vlog with it. For vlogging, again, I use the Arca Swiss plate on my switch pod, which is actually a really useful tool. If you haven't heard of the switch pod before, it's fantastic. It's got a little Arca Swiss plate on the top with a ball mount, and you can just, again, you got your little vlogging setup and you're good to go. All you have to do, unscrew this, take off that, got your camera again. Again, maybe you just want to put it back in the rig. You just slide it into the mount on the camera rig itself and you're good to go. And that's what I love about this rig. It's incredibly modular. You can have the bare bones camera. You can even take it out of the cage if you want to. You've got a camera for taking photos, stick it on the switch pod for vlogging, or stick it in the big rig for either cinematography style shooting when you want to have the big rig, or with a teleprompter on front to use for sort of studio style talking to make sure that my framing is correct, so I'm not sort of continuously looking over to the right of the camera. And the nice thing about this setup is you can do this with any camera. I try to use ones that have the flip out screen. It kind of makes it a little bit easier to use, like the Sony ZV-E10, which you've been watching this whole video on so far. It works great, so it's pretty interchangeable. You know, if you want to just keep all of the accessories and upgrade your camera body, you can do that with ease. Now you might be asking, why am I using the Sony A7C as my main YouTube camera? And that's a pretty good question because I was really debating going for the FX30. So the FX30 is a fantastic camera, but there are two main reasons that I went for the A7C. And that's because it's more of a hybrid camera, right? The FX30 is a cinema camera. Phenomenal and probably better video specs than the A7C has. But I need hybrid shooting, right? My wife is a photographer. I do mainly videography. We share all of our gear. We've got a lot of full frame Sony lenses. It'd be a shame not to use those on a full frame body. You may as well just have Super 35 lenses. So it's kind of nice to have a full frame camera that I can make use of all my full frame lenses. And with it being hybrid, I can use it for thumbnails, I can use it for video, my wife can use it for photography. It does all of the things. I don't shoot slow motion very much. If I'm ever filming higher end events, I tend to be using like a Zcam E2F6 is one of my main cinema cameras that I love using, or Blackmagic cameras or Komodos, whatever it might be. I'll rent stuff for that. I don't really need many super high-end cinema cameras for me to own and have all the time. So for me, having a hybrid camera just makes a lot more sense for my usage. Again, the FX30 is a fantastic camera. I got this for about $600 less than I would pay for an FX30. And that extra $600 you can get an incredible lens. So for example, pretty much everything I do on YouTube, I use the Sony 20mm f1.8G. And this lens costs about $600. So for me, it just made a whole lot more sense to buy a camera and lens combo for the same price as an FX30 and use them in this scenario, but also be able to use them for my wife's photography or any other purposes that we might use. It's a little bit more versatile in its usage than the FX30, just in my situation. So if you have an FX30, don't get me wrong, incredible camera, enjoy it, use it. I want to see some of the content you're making with it. For me, the A7C is just a fantastic camera. It's older, you can find them quite cheap, and the quality that comes out of them I think is fantastic. I don't think you can really go wrong. So yeah, that's about all I got for today. I love this camera, I love this rig, and I love what it can do for YouTube. You can do this with any camera that you want. Just stick a different camera in a different cage into the same rig and it'll work great for you. If you're interested and you want to use any of the products that I've talked about today, they're in the description down below. They are affiliate links, so if you use those, it really helps out the channel. Much appreciated. And if you're still watching, maybe even hit the like button, drop a comment, or even subscribe as we continue to build this channel. I really appreciate all of you for doing that, and I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time.